Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Snap No Tap podcast. I'm Tony Cecchine along with Joe Cardinal, and we have a very, very big surprise guest. Well, he's probably not a surprise now. You guys can, those who are watching us on YouTube know who he is already, but for those that are listening, you don't know who he is yet. But let me kick it back a few steps. We've been on a roll. So like 2 episodes ago, we had one of the nation's finest musicians on. Last week we had one of my students and I've said it, I believe one of the finest kickboxers in the country. And how could he not be great? He was trained by Bill Superfoot Wallace for so many years. And then today on our 100th episode, we have one of the country's absolute best submission grapplers on. You've heard me recommend him to you people before. It's an honor to have him. He's a living legend, believe it or not. He is awesome to have you. Welcome, Mr. Erik Paulson, to the podcast. What an honor.
Thanks, guys. Thank you for having me.
Oh, we're really excited. This is great. Way to make it a 100th episode. This is awesome.
Wow. Yeah, it's funny. The 100th episode, that was like the 100th anniversary of the UFC. I cornered Brock for the 100th, and it was such a big deal.
Wow, that is huge.
Kind of quinkadinkle that I get to be on the 100th episode. Or the 100th.
You're Mr. 100. Yeah. Everybody's good luck charm for that. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Joe, you've got a whole bunch of questions lined up. Why don't you have at it, man?
Well, it's usually weird because normally I kind of come at it with the assumption that we're going to have to tell everybody where you're from, or let's get the basic story. And it's like, everybody who listens to this podcast is going to know, but I always feel like I should just rehash things and like start at the beginning. Actually, before we actually started recording, we started talking about your background. You're originally from Minnesota. Is that right?
Yep. I was born and raised in Coon Rapids, Minnesota. And at 19, I packed my bags to come to California for martial arts with Dan Inosanto and college and modeling and acting at the time.
I'm still working on getting my modeling career going. No such luck yet, but
still
that's
do
awesome.
Hey, you could do hair, you could do nails, you could do your smile.
I got it all. Yeah, I'm a trifecta. But that's interesting because I was actually reading up on your profile that so when you moved to Minnesota, which is really cool. So you had already been involved enough in martial arts that at 19, you're like, I'm going to relocate to train with Inosanto. Because I think obviously, but was it like the early 80s when you did that, or late 70s?
That was 1986.
Okay, so like mid 80s.
I graduated 84. And then in 1986, I packed my bags. I went to spring break. I went out to visit my aunt. She lived in Indio and Palm Desert. And I went and visited her. And I was like, man, California. I went there for Christmas and I came home with a beautiful tan and everyone's like, whoa. And I go, I think I want to move to the sunny city. I need to get out of the cold winters. And that was before they had the electronic car starters.
So you could warm up your car in the house.
Yeah. All my friends in New York have those. They start their car up a half hour before they get in it. It's all toasty and warm.
Yeah. I mean, so yeah, obviously being in the Chicago area, we've got it cold, but it's nowhere near as cold as Minnesota. Oh my God. Because you guys even like in the buildings have like basically those hamster tubes to get from building to building to avoid getting out, right? I mean, that's a bad news. Yeah. That's a bad sign. If you're going to a city where you have to, you don't want to cross the street because it's so cold. Oh man,
Well, we're
That's
talking January, February, March. It's January, February is the coldest time there usually.
oh yeah, it's brutal here too.
You guys, because of Lake Michigan, you get a ton of cold weather there too, also, right?
oh yeah. It's a kind of cold that starts to burn. It's not cold anymore. The wind just like burns a layer off your skin, and it's. And I'm actually kind of more upset just thinking about it right now. I'm gonna be
You know
heading back
what?
into.
If you ask me, I think Midwesterners, because of the weather half the year, their skin gets preserved a lot better, and so I think it makes them look more youthful. That's what I've
Possibly.
noticed.
We
Yeah.
definitely don't get any of that. Like we're indoors for half the year because it's just horrible, and so we probably don't. Although we're pale as a ghost often, so when you see us,
Yeah.
we'll be
But
like a
that's what tanning boots and the tanning gel is for.
exactly. Tony knows all about the tanning booth. He's Mr.
Oh,
Tanning Booth.
we used to have one at my gym. Remember?
Yeah.
Tanning
Yo,
boots are
so
great.
I was originally from Cleveland and I moved to Chicago, kind of similar with you, but I not for modeling or acting, but for music, because I'd already done most of my training and shit. But so I understand that. And you said you moved in '86. I moved to Chicago in '87. So
Wow.
yeah. Now I'm a couple of years older than you because I graduated in '82. So I was like 20. Yeah, I was 23 when I moved here. But there's similarities. But yeah, the winter in Cleveland, oh man, because Cleveland sits directly below Lake Erie. So we were on what was called the snow belt. Probably like you guys, it would be nothing for us to get 20, 25 inches of snow.
That's right.
Oh.
That's just like Minnesota used to be. And then my friends all sold their snowmobiles. And I said, why'd you sell that? Why? And they go, we haven't had snow here for about 7 years.
Wow.
No kidding. Wow.
But then it started coming back again. I think it's just cyclical.
Yeah.
Probably, yeah. There's all kinds of stuff. Yeah, it's hard to tell.
Change.
For sure.
Well, that's interesting. I did not know that you were into the modeling and the acting. So I got a question before I forget it. When you were thinking about being an actor, was it an action movie or just any part?
In the beginning, it was commercial work. So I was doing a lot of swimwear stuff, and I was doing. I used to do. I don't like to talk about it, but I used to do a lot of fashion shows. So I had really nice clothes because I used to get sponsored by all these companies, and then I get photo work for catalogs, and I used to do some swimwear and underwear stuff, and then I said, I don't really want to do this. I want to kind of break into the commercial acting, and then get into the method acting, and then get into the comedy. And I love comedy. I wanted to be a comedian.
Oh.
But then I started researching all these famous comedians, and I noticed that later on in their lives, I was looking at their lives later, and a lot of them were really sad, very depressed. And, I think they were forcing jokes out. Everything was like forced, and it wasn't, I liked it when it was organic, but later on, I felt like there was a lot of sad people in that industry at that time. Anyways, I'm talking late 80s.
Okay. There's definitely a group of comedians that I think stand up or whatever there is. It's like almost like a form of therapy for them.
Oh, sure.
And you can almost hear the pathos in their jokes. It's like, because for a lot of people, humor is a defense mechanism, and so they're dealing with pain and coping. And so, if they're a smart person, and a lot of times, honestly, I think like very intelligent people, sometimes they can kind of spiral with their mental health. And please don't, I have no mental health background or professional. I'm just like rambling here, but I can see that where like certain comedians, there's a darkness sometimes to their humor.
It's a lot of like some of the musicians, some of the best music comes from some of the most tormented souls. Some of the best songs.
A lot of art in general. I think a lot of creative, I've mentioned on this podcast a couple of times before, like, I love the original Conan stories by Robert E. Howard, and he committed suicide, very early, and he was a brilliant writer, had this bright future ahead of himself, but it was almost like, I often, and we don't know, no one talked to him. He never left a letter, those things. But you just think when you have that powerful of a mind, a creative mind, if you get fixated on something that's, because there's a lot of sadness out there. Let's face it. The world can be a tragic place. And I think if, whether either is happening to your personal life or you're just awareness of the world around you, I think it can go badly for a lot of those creative types, and it's or very intellectual types. So and I think the entertainment industry in general can be very risky. I mean, there's a lot of money, there's a lot of access to things, so it's definitely it can have a, clearly, I mean, we've all heard the stories, of all the great stars who've crashed and burned and left us too early. So
Look at Frank Frazetta. Frank Frazetta's work, a lot of his art is very dark, but it's pretty cool. It's like the Conan.
It's amazing. Oh yeah, I love his stuff.
So you look at some of it, you go, whoa, that's pretty dark.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
But I also worked at a jazz, rhythm, and blues club. I was a bartender for almost 9 years at this place in LA, in Venice. And we had some of the best musicians from jazz, rhythm, and blues come in and play regular. It is kind of weird because I wasn't like a huge fan at first. And then I was trying to figure out who these people were that were coming in playing regularly. We had King Cotton, Stanley Behrens, and all these guys would come in and get up on stage and play. And it was just amazing to be a witness to that, while I was trying to, come into my own with my own career and, hustling to get acting parts, auditioning for parts, but also training hard at the same time and trying to figure out what I was going to do, if I was going to go the acting route or if I was going to go the martial arts route.
Well,
that's very cool.
Speaking of auditioning, now, how did you have to audition to get with how did you get with Danny Nisano? Let's just put it that way, because he's a legend of them all.
Yeah.
He's wow.
Danny Nisano. So let's see. So I was living in Palm Desert, and there was nothing out there, just karate and boxing. So I was doing taekwondo and boxing, and then all of a sudden, my friends were in Palm Springs, or they were in going to Redlands and training with Tim Tackett in his garage. And they asked me if I'd be interested. So I started going into Tim Tackett's garage and found out that Tim Tackett was Dan Nisano's student and was also Rick Fay from Minnesota. Rick Fay's friend and student, or not student, but teacher. Rick trained with Sifu Tackett. And then it was a bounce from Redlands to LA, and then I went to LA and I was doing privates with Benny the Jet Urquidez.
Wow.
Jet Center. And I drove by the Inosanto Academy one day and I said, hey, I wonder what they have going, because they always had specialty seminars going on the weekends. And they would have Bondo or Aiki Jiu-Jitsu. And this one time they had Yuri Nakamura. And this was in 1987. And Yuri Nakamura was teaching a Shudo seminar. And he was introducing Shudo to US, basically, or to America. And it just had a picture of him punching, kicking, grabbing somebody, suplexing them, and then submitting them. And it just said punch, kick, throw, submit. And that was the first seminar that I actually got to take at the Inosanto Academy. I was also I did the Aiki Jiu-Jitsu, and I did Silat, and Nino Bernardo was there teaching Wing Chun. So I was trying to take all these things, but I really wanted to try to fight because, I already had years of striking, and my brother is a wrestler. So we incidentally or accidentally, we used to wrestle in the living room, which I say is America's favorite pastime. I was a gymnast. I wasn't a wrestler. So Greg Nelson and I were gymnasts competing against each other, but he wrestled too. But a lot of the wrestlers on my gymnastics team were really cocky and brash, and they weren't easy to get along with, and they always wanted to fight. So kind of at that time had a little beef with a few guys, not wrestling, but a few guys. And then my brother and I used to always argue what was better, kickboxing or wrestling. And I would usually try to kick him in the head when I had a chance, and he'd just grab me and pick me up and slam me, and then we'd end up on the ground. So I already knew that, that the fight would end up there. And so I needed to learn to do something about it. And while I was in Tim Tackett's garage, he told me about the Gracie family, about these Brazilians that came to America that had an open challenge. And he said, you should go do some privates just to see what it's like and come back and, report to us to see what it's like. And it was funny at the time, Guru Dan Asano, I was riding in the back of his car or his van as he was teaching college martial arts class at Harbor City College. And he was stating, and Larry Hartzell was in the van with us, and he said, I'm looking at the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. It looks like ground judo to me. It just looks like Newaza. And he said, I don't see any difference. And I go, well, they have more emphasis, I think, more on their guard and stuff than they do, more off their back than they did. Like judo had all the different positions and stuff, but they really focused more on their guard. That's what that was back then. So in 1987, 1988, I got to do a seminar with Yuri Nakamura. And I remember my roommate was a blue belt under Hickson at the time. And I went and took the seminar on the weekend. 1980, I think it was end of 87, early 88. And I remember I came home and I learned 30 new submissions. And my roommate and I both as blue belts had the same amount of information. And I remember I came back and I had ankle locks, heel hooks, neck cranks, chicken wings. And it was at that time, I was like, hold on a second. Nobody knows this stuff. Because all the guys, especially in South Bay, because it was, the home of where Gracie Jiu-Jitsu was, that's how I got kind of shot into the whole wrestling, catch wrestling. And I was doing both of them at the same time. I was doing jiu-jitsu silently and quietly. And I was going to the Shudo, doing privates with Yuri Nakamura and the catch wrestling, and then training with Larry Hartzell and then Gene LaBelle, and trying to learn as much as I could about that aspect of things. And then I became good friends with Rico Ciparelli. And then Rico and I traded catch wrestling for wrestling. So Rico is one of Dan Gable's guys. And next thing you know, my grappling went more from jiu-jitsu more to a catch style with a lot more wrestling base. So I kind of got to get a little bit of both. And I also did judo when I was in 1974. I did judo when I was a kid and competed in that, but it was never the same as training in the garage privately, and then also getting to learn the catch wrestling from Yuri. And Yuri's catch wrestling was of Carl Gotch lineage. So I know Luthez, you're under Luthez, right? And many others, right, Tony?
Yes. Yeah. Stanley Rodvon originally in Cleveland in the 70s. And then I met Lou later on, and Lou was like, just a wonderful, I can't say enough good things about Luthez.
Wow.
But, you mentioned Larry Hartzell. I just want to say quickly that I met him twice out here when he was doing a seminar for another guy that I was training as well. Marcus Charles, yeah. And boy, I'll tell you something. Larry was, you can't make a nicer human being than Larry Hartzell. We clicked. I mean, we just, boom. He was so nice and easy to talk to.
He's an ex-Vietnam vet. So like he could go off sometimes, and he loved the street fight.
We would talk about the street fighting. Yeah.
Throw some beer in the mix, and next thing you know.
Yeah, unfortunately, I saw him. No, he wasn't drinking at this stage of his life. Was pretty much near the end.
Oh, yeah, that's
very unfortunate. He was thin, and matter of fact, he wanted me to make him a video of knee bars, and by the time I was able to film it, he sadly had passed.
Yeah.
But I'm going to tell you, he really made an impression on me. Just, how we talked, as if he talked to me as if he knew me for 40 years, telling me Bruce Lee stories and just stories that, bouncing stories, and it was great.
When you click with him, he finds a common denominator, and then he opens his heart. He's from the South, so he had that Southern hospitality, and he loved boxing, trained with Bruce Lee, so he had the trapping. He loved the collie, but he really loved all the wrist locks and the catch wrestling stuff. That was his niche, what he loved.
Well, we had that in common, the boxing and the wrestling, the catch wrestling. So that's probably what you're in a self-defense aspect. So that's probably what you're saying. He found that common denominator, because I never studied, collie or any stick and knife like that. So we didn't even talk about that.
If he knows you're a boxer and a wrestler, that's all he needs to know about you.
Yeah, he was. Now tell me, your training, like, give us a typical idea of, did you work out for a couple hours? Was it, 4 hours or smaller sessions? I mean, how'd you approach it? Because you were young enough then to probably had all the energy in the world.
Yeah. Well, we used to do, morning was all striking and throwing. So I have to be at the gym at 8 a.m. And then we start with shadow boxing and leg swings. And next thing you know, you're in the ring and you got whatever, 10 or 12 rounds of sparring of kickboxing and shoot boxing. And then you got bag work, focus mitts, kicking shield, and then ground bag. And then you'd go eat, maybe take a nap if you had to. Then my workouts were 5 shirt workouts. So I had to go through at least 5 to 8 shirts per workout. My shirts were completely wet. And that's how I rated my workout, was the amount of t-shirts you'd go through, because they were completely soaked. But so we go 2 hours, and then we go to lunch, take a break, and then I go to Marine Athletic Club, and I would lift weights or jump in the swimming pool, or I'd either go bike riding, rollerblading, or running, or swimming. And Seafood Larry loved the fact that I like to go biking. So we would ride along the ocean, go from Manhattan Beach to El Segundo. We would ride between beaches, and I also loved to rollerblade. And it's so funny, Larry would bring his rollerblades in his knapsack and carry them on board. And I remember I carried his bag one time. He had a green duffel bag, and he goes, "Todai, grab my bag." So I picked up his bag, and his bag, it was literally 120 pounds. And I go, "Larry, what do you have in this?" He goes, "I got my rollerblades and I got my weights." And I go, "You're carrying your weights with you?" And I go, "Why don't you just do push-ups and Hindu squats?" And he goes, "No, you got to have those weights. You got to pump iron every day." That was crazy. But that was it. And then the night training was either jiu-jitsu or wrestling, or I either would have Rico Chiapparelli, or I would go to the Machados, or I go down to Boxing Works, and I just roll with no gi, and it was all ground submission stuff. So I was getting wrestling, jiu-jitsu, the catch stuff, and then the shoot boxing and kickboxing mixed. And some days we'd box. Some days it was just straight kickboxing, and then some days it was just shoot boxing, punching, kicking, and throwing. But that was half the work. Yeah. So that was the training. I was trying to get 3 workouts in a day, and then somebody said, "You're too big for that many workouts 5 days a week. So we're going to tell you you're overtraining." And then it was Mark Kerr and Mark Coleman. I said, "Well, how are you guys training?" And they go, we only train 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and that's it. And I go, "Is that enough?" And they go, "Yeah, because you're big. Your body needs a break. You need to." So for me, there were no rules, so I didn't know how much was too much. So I was running day and night, morning. I'd wake up, I'd go run on the beach, and then I'd do my workouts. And at night, I'd do a 30-minute run or 40-minute run right before dinner at dusk. But man, those are the best times of my life when I could do that. Just remembering being on the beach at that early in the morning, as the sun's coming up, or running at dusk, living down at the beach. That was some of my favorite times. Definitely. It's so funny how we get old so fast. Like it just seems like yesterday, and all of a sudden you're like, whoa, hold on, I'm over 50 now. And I'm watching it going in my head. I think I'm waiting to start doing it again, but I know that I can't do that.
Oh man, you're talking my lingo now, because I feel it every day. Somebody just the other day asked me how old I am, and I mean, I've said it before, but when I said it this time, I said 58, and it clicked. I'm like, in 2 years, I'm going to be 60 years old. I can't.
You look great.
Well, thanks,
That's
but
great.
I mean, how do we go from being workout fanatics and kicking everybody's ass to being senior citizens? This ain't fair.
I think you just have to still stay active, and even if it's coaching, when you're older and you can't get in there and do it as much, I think that coaching still keeps you young. And you had a really good protege that took a couple of my seminars in Indiana, Asian guy.
Oh, Brian Deneve.
Yeah. And I said, hey, Brian, where'd you wrestle? And he goes, I never wrestled. And I go, well, hold on a second. You're hitting sit outs and barrel rolls. I go, where did you learn that? And he goes, Tony. And I went, wait a second. He teaches you how to wrestle, ground wrestle, on top of the catch wrestle and the submission stuff. And he goes, yeah. And I go, holy crap. I thought for sure he's a wrestler.
Yeah.
No,
Brian,
was great.
Yeah, Brian unfortunately couldn't be on the podcast tonight, but yeah, he spoke highly of you too. And that's what's nice. I've never met anybody that said anything bad, and I never got to, when we talked on the phone years ago, but we never got to meet. But there is something, I don't know if you can answer this question. It's not important. Nobody else will give a damn, but it's important to me because when I was a kid, my only exposure really to martial arts, like, the actual, like, we're martial artists, but back then boxers and wrestlers weren't considered martial artists. So my only exposure to the Asian martial arts, let's put it, was magazines. Now and then I could get a magazine and read. Well, being in Cleveland, kind of neutral town, there was always this big rivalry of New York, they're the best in the country. California, they're the best in the country. And these guys, I guess, used to hate each other's guts. Did you ever witness any of that kind of rivalry, East Coast, West Coast?
Yeah, because of it was the karate though. Because back then it was more the karate style. So it was like you'd have the guys like I used to go to the Diamond Nationals in Minnesota, and that's where all the top Billy Blanks would come in. Steve Nasty Anderson, all these top guys, Terry Norblum, John Longstreet, Pat Worley, all these guys that were coming in. Yeah, there was always a rivalry. Demetris Hanavas. There's a lot of older Ray McCallum. He was from Texas. These guys were all like point karate, turn full contact fighters. And yeah, I guess it was like the rap world, it's like West Coast versus East Coast. It kind of was that. You're right. And so you look at all these karate guys, they got heavily into boxing because full contact became super popular. And all you had to have is 8 kicks per round above the waist. And then after you got your 8 kicks in, it turned into a boxing match. So you had to have good boxing and just, 8 kicks around. So that was an interesting time to see that change. And then it was Duke, Rufus, Rick Rufus and Duke. They were actually starting to cross fight the ties. And that's why Duke started actually incorporating a lot of the Thai boxing into his training, because his brother used to challenge those guys. And they're like, hey, what is this style? with this, these guys are just kicking so hard. And that's when like Benny the Jet was going over to Japan to fight, and he was fighting alongside with Tadashi Yamashita was bringing guys, and they had a lot of fighters going over there, and they were challenging their American style kickboxing, which is predominant hands with good jump back kicks and good round kick hook kicks with the boxing versus the Japanese Thai boxing style, more Japanese style back then. It was mostly because Japan was a huge market for, same with Pride, but they'd love to have the foreigners come in and challenge them. Very
nice.
big.
I wasn't really involved in the karate world, but I do remember I was real young. I'm talking like maybe 10, 11 or something. And Cleveland had a guy who was, supposedly, I don't mean it like he's lying, but he was the first, I think, karate world champion American guy and he was from Cleveland. His name was Algene Carulia, and he lived on the west side. I lived on the east side. I was a kid. I met him once, just not even knowing, who he was until like weeks later when I read about him in a magazine. I'm like, Jesus, I met this guy. Yeah.
Was
So
remember Manson Gibson? Wasn't he from that area or somewhere around there?
That name rings a bell, and I'm not saying he was or wasn't. The name rings a bell. I'm not sure.
Manson Gibson used to run backwards. He would run 7 miles backwards. He had the weirdest style of karate and kickboxing. He would knock everyone out, but I go, well, what makes him so different? He goes, well, you know how you do your runs forward? He does them backwards.
Huh.
Manson Gibson. Interesting times.
Right?
Yeah, but Tony, so Luthez, so you started under
a guy named Stanley Rodvine, which when I was a kid, he taught me basically everything that I know, all the rips and the hooks and
wow.
self-defense aspect. Well, Eric, this is 1977 when I started. So there was no sport like that. You know what I mean? There was
definitely.
Judo or Sambo. We never heard of it, saw it. I mean, we heard of Judo, but
yeah. And
then years go by, I met Lou, and Lou was like, oh my God, you're doing what I did. I didn't know anybody did what I did. And we clicked. Yeah, we clicked. And you know what we used to do a lot? Because he was already basically 80.
Oh, geez.
Lou was. And we would just he would ask me questions on how would I set up this move? And I tell him, and I go, how do you set up, such and such a move? And we would exchange things like that, because by that time we knew all the submissions. You're not going to surprise anybody with something new. It's your setups and your thing. And then he would take me on a time machine. He'd say, let me show you how Ed Strangler Lewis did this. Let me show you. Yeah. Right.
Wow. What a historical, that's unbelievable.
He was the most approachable guy. He didn't have time for a lot of BS.
Yeah, he didn't seem like that.
He wasn't like that. And he was tough as nails to the very end. Believe me, him and I almost got into a couple rumbles together when I went and saw him in Orlando. It was just with his wife there. I mean, it was just unbelievable. He was tenacious, but he was a gentleman. Now, here's the thing about Lou. My first instructor, Stanley Rodvine, was so strong, just amazingly strong. He's still the toughest man I've ever seen or heard of in my life. Wow. But Lou was more built like me. We were the same height. We were the same weight. So we would move similar. Okay. Well, not when he was 80, but you know what I'm saying, in his prime. So we had a lot of similarities. Our styles were very similar. So we clicked like that. I miss him. It's like 20 years basically since he passed away. And
how old was you when you were training with him?
Well, let's do the math. I met him in 1998. I think I met Lou in 98. So I knew him for the last 5 years of his life, basically. And I was with my first coach for 5 years. So yeah, but Lou, you know, here's the difference. When I was studying with Stanley Rodvan, I was a young boy and I became a young man with him. When I was with Lou, I was already a grown man. So you approach things differently. You can ask questions that you don't as a kid. You don't think to. Kids are seen and not heard kind of deal. So but blending these two guys together was, I just hit the jackpot. Kind of like you being, being able to train with Yuri Nakamura, and then you have the Machados or whomever else.
Yeah, Machado, Dan and Asano. Yeah, it was very.
Yeah.
And that was one reason why I tried to get from Minnesota to California, because I knew that there were so many superstar martial artists out here, like Cecchine for Muay Thai, Rob Kamen came out, and I used to spar with him. He became my sparring partner. Lucio Riker was out here. They were all searching their careers, and then for wrestling, I got to meet up with Rico Chiapparelli, and he said, "Hey, I want you to come down and try to catch these guys." And I said, "Who are these guys?" And he goes, "Don't worry about who they are. Just try to catch them." So I got to roll with these three wrestlers, and I didn't know who they were. And I go, "Who are these guys?" He goes, "That's Randy Couture. This is Dan Henderson." And then there was another guy. His name is Dennis Hall. He was from Iowa, and gold medalist. And these guys were all like highly accoladed wrestlers, but Rico wanted to see how they would fare against a guy that was trying to submit him. And I didn't know that Rico was trying to play that off to see where I was and where they were. Mm-hmm. So, just trying to get into an area and get around the right people. You just kind of are fortunate to meet the right people at the right time, and everyone kind of falls into place like that. I mean, for you to get catch wrestling like that, especially as like your first art, that's amazing.
Yeah, and the guy went to my church. I mean, that's how we met. He was much older. He was a World War II concentration camp survivor. He's from Poland originally. Yeah. So he was actually older than my grandparents. He was 70 years old, basically, when I started with him, like 69. Yeah, but it didn't matter. I mean, he was still doing strongman shows and bending coins. So
that was part of it.
Well, here's something that I want to say, because since you're on the show, and I may have mentioned this, but a lot of people look at like me, or maybe you even too, I don't know what your life experience is, but they'll be like, "Oh, catch wrestling, it's just for big, strong guys." It's not true. When I started with him, with my stuff, I was what did that book say, Joe, that I wrote my notes? 110 pounds.
Yeah, I was like a buck 15 or something.
You were 110 pounds
when I started learning, and then when I finally stopped 5 years later, was when I was graduating from high school. I weighed 178 pounds, so I was never as muscular as I became. So I learned all my stuff. So I tell this to like people who are smaller or women. There is a size matters to a degree, but this isn't for like big, strong guys. Most of the greatest wrestlers were, smaller weight guys. So,
and in shape though.
Oh, like of course, you got to be strong.
Burns. Yeah, look at Farmer Burns.
Absolutely, he wasn't big. John Pesek wasn't big. All these great legends, Ray Steele. But yeah, you have to be in shape, no matter what you are or how much you weigh. Fitness was always important, and being raised by a strong man like him, learning all the different exercises for my hands and the arms and everything, the free weight exercises. So I didn't have access to weights at that point. Really made a difference. But there's a lot of, I didn't know this about you. There's a lot of similarities between us that I wasn't aware of.
Yeah, gymnastics for me was very similar body weight exercises, pull-ups and dips and Hindu squats. And we used to do jackknives for your stomach and crunches. Every workout in gymnastics, we had to do 200 push-ups, 200 pull-ups, and 200 dips every training session. And that was during high school. That's
Yeah.
that's a ton of stuff. But the body weight exercises, but you got to learn the old school stuff, the old school exercises. And
Yeah, with also with the European slant, and the cool thing about Radvan, he traveled the whole world. Well, I shouldn't say the whole world, but he traveled a large portion of the world, wrestling. This is before World War II, wrestling and doing his strongman shows. So, like Lou Thez, who was a bit younger, Lou traveled the world and wrestling, and got to see how athletes do things from different parts of the world. And one of the things Lou used to tell me is, we'd watch a wrestler, let's say in India, for example, he's wrestling in India. He'll see a guy do some moves, and Lou would be like, you know what? There's potential there. We can work this when I get back home to America. I'm going to work this into something, meaning turning it into a more combat-oriented tactic. So yeah, those guys, Radvan, Lou Thez, they came from an era that really doesn't exist now, and they were luckily able to pick up so much just from being all over.
One thing, when I was in Japan, so I got to go, I was training Josh for Pride, and on a Friday night, him and Matt Hume decided to go to dinner. And so I had the night off, it was the night before his fight. So I jumped on a train and I went to the Snake Pit, and I got to see Billy Robinson. And this is probably about 6 months before he passed. But I went there and I said, hey, I'm here to train with you, sir. Could I jump on the mat and take your class? And he just looks at me and he goes, no. He goes, roll with him. And he points to his top guy. And I said, but I want to learn technique and, the catch wrestling from you.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, no, just roll with my guy. I want to watch you. And it was funny because he was teaching, he wasn't watching us, but he was watching us out of the corner of his eye.
Okay.
But he made me go with his guy, and I just wanted to learn from him. But Matt Hume told him when I first went to the Snake Pit, they said, who are those guys? He goes, well, that's Josh Barnett, and that's his coach. Erik Paulson. He goes, that's his coach? And he goes, yeah. And he goes, oh. And it was after that, he didn't want to share anything with me. He was kind of, hands back. Like he wanted to see, why, because he knew Josh was a catch style wrestler. And he said, well, okay, well, I want to see this guy that supposedly is coach, what he knows or what he can do. So I had to roll with this guy, and he was small. He runs a Snake Pit. He's the head coach there. And he goes, start. I go, up or down? He goes, start down. I go, okay, like where? On our knees? And he goes, yeah, just start on your knees. And I go, you sure you don't want to start on your feet? He goes, no, there's not enough room, and there's class going on. You're going to land on people. Just start down. So we started down, and it was 10 minutes back and forth. I couldn't take him down. He couldn't take me down. We were going back and forth, and I'm like, well, screw that. We got another 10 minutes left. So I pulled guard and I swept him. And then I went on top. And listen, I didn't want to pull guard. I'm in a catch wrestling school. That's all I needed to get booed off the floor. Boo, you're one of those guys. But I only did it because we couldn't take each other down. So, but it was nice that I got to go there and listen to Billy talk. And I asked him if I could take him out for some dinner. And he said, no, I probably have a can of soup in my cupboard somewhere. And I said, are you sure you wouldn't let me just take you to dinner? Let me take you to a good meal or something. And he said, no. And I go, well, how about a beer? And he goes, now you're talking. So
Right.
That was the best thing. We went and had ramen, and we had a couple beers. And he opened up talking about the history of catch wrestling and everything. And I asked him, and I said, hey, so he told me about the history of the Snake Pit in England, in Wigan, and how it was open 24 hours a day, and people were coming in off the trains all the time from all different wrestling and judo, jiu-jitsu guys, and Japanese jiu-jitsu guys back then. And then I said, how come, why do you think catch wrestling's really lost Why do you, what's going on there? How come, what happened to all the catch wrestlers of your time? And he said, well, he said, a lot of them died. A lot of them have died off. Then there are some that were really good, but they didn't want to teach anybody. So they're super secretive with their information. So it started dying off with these people because they weren't sharing their info.
Yeah.
And then the third thing was they were getting sick. They get it like a toothache, and there was no cure back then for a toothache except for tooth extraction or impetigo or conjunctivitis, pink eye. They'd go blind in their eye because they didn't have anything to treat their pink eye. And he said a lot of the old catch wrestlers, because of hard times and because of ailments and lack of money, poverty, they committed suicide.
What a tragedy. And he's right, especially about the eyes, because Ed Strangler Lewis went blind from that, you know.
He
They
did.
didn't have
Wow.
cures. Yeah. And on that same note, like when I would talk with Lou Thez about, I would name some now. So Billy Robinson was the, you know, he knew the English stuff. So I was raised more with the American stuff. And when I would talk to Lou and I would drop certain names, Lou would get like really angry, you know, and oh yeah, he's like, you know, that guy's an asshole, this and that. But the more I would prompt him and we talk openly, Lou had problems with a couple of them, but business wise, okay, because these guys became promoters. And one in particular, John Pesic, the other Toots Mont, okay, those two. And Lou had issues with them from a business standpoint. But when I'd say, forget about all that, just forget it, forget all the business, you know, let's talk about them, you know, rolling around. And he would begrudgingly admit these guys were, you know, fantastic.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. So there's always that, you know, did they get screwed somehow? Did they get double crossed? You know, yeah. So there's a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, because of the business, because that was their job, and they're carnival wrestlers originally. Yeah. And then in the 30s, when it became popular and it became entertainment, it became having your own shtick, your own move, having your own gimmick. Mm-hmm. Also, the acting and acrobatics came about, so people were looking at it more as a business than like in the old days. It was just grapple anyone that challenges you.
Well, that's very true, and part of the pro wrestling, the work matches is it really set not a lot of guys knew all the hooks, but even the ones that did, it set them back a lot because they had to change the way they trained. They had to change the way they did more of a performance art style of wrestling. Sort of like, let's imagine Jackie Chan, you know, doing his kung fu in the movies. Yeah. He wouldn't fight like that if he had to, but a lot of these guys, they ended up, the new crop that would come in, they had to learn all the theatrical ways to escape, the flamboyance. And at least here in America, I can't speak for England, but here, that's how a lot of the real shit got lost because it wasn't needed. Yeah. Everybody was cooperating, and the style, their training was no longer, it was authentic, but it wasn't like to beat an opponent. It was to put your opponent over or make it a good performance. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Wow.
But you know, I wish you could have met Lou. I wish you could have met Stanley Rodvan. He was a very difficult man, very difficult in that he had a rough life, you know, being in a concentration camp.
Wow.
He wouldn't talk about it. Yeah. They pretty much, there's a lot of info about what he went through. Some of it is exaggerated, but a lot of it is right on. But he was rough, and it was at a rough time in America in the 70s. We were in a high crime area, and Rodvan used to tell me, I want the worst beatings you ever get to happen here, not on the street. So yeah, Joe knows that if I trained people like he trained me, I would have one session and then I would have been let out of there in handcuffs. Okay. They'd have called the cops on me. It was tough. Yeah, but it was a different time.
Oh, right?
Yeah. You know, my grandparents that raised me were like, you know, you shut up, you know, you just listen, you know, you do what he says. But but Lou was more like a grandfather at that point, grandfatherly to me. And his wife, Charlie, was just a wonderful Southern lady.
Wow.
And Lou and I would talk about, he would tell stories about the business. Not that I was interested because I wasn't a professional wrestler, but he would tell me his street encounters and just funny anecdotes. And he would like my previous coach, he'd lay the law down on who was a real shooter and who was like a, fake shooter. I don't want to drop names now, but he kind of said, because he came from like the next generation. Like he was about 10 years younger than Stanley Rodvon. So they kind of ran into different circles. But
was he like the same age as Gene LaBelle and Carl Gotch and
Lou, he was a little older than Carl. He's probably older than Gene because Gene, I've talked to Gene on the phone two or three times years ago. He loved Lou Thesz. Lou would mention that he'd see Gene when Lou would be wrestling in LA at the Coliseum or whatever. It may not have been the Coliseum, but whatever his mother, Gene LaBelle's mother, owned, the auditorium.
LA Auditorium, I think.
Yeah, that's it. And Gene would be there watching the guys working out, Gene could not stop talking about Lou in a great way. Lou is just he was like the last of the Mohicans as far as that era here in America. And I don't know if he ever wrestled Billy Robinson. I don't think so, because there was too big of an age gap and they were in different organizations. But he wrestled Carl Gotch and Danny Hodge and Vern Gagne. He wrestled all those guys. I miss him. He was just a great guy.
Are you still teaching or coaching or teaching?
I try, when I can. I've been out of the loop for many years because I had to take care of my mom who had dementia and Alzheimer's, and I hated to. I finally had to put her in a nursing home just a few months ago in May.
Sorry.
Yeah, it was rough because I'm an only child. She's an only child, so I didn't have help. But I try to do like one seminar or two a month now. We just started this again. So it's a small group. Hopefully it'll expand. Our problem is we don't know marketing. People probably don't even watch the podcast. I don't know.
But you got the young, all you got to do is get a young guy to do your marketing, get you on Instagram. And once you get that and possibly a YouTube channel and let them do all the stuff for you.
Yeah, we probably need to look into that because our YouTube channel's got a few followers. I've never been on Instagram, but I don't want to talk about me because let's talk about you because you're very interesting.
It's important that people know because didn't you just do a self-defense, catch wrestling for self-defense series with BJJ Fanatics?
Yeah, about a year ago. That was supposed to be the first of a continuing series, but I don't know if we're going to do any more. I haven't been in contact with them. That was tough because they wanted me to fly out to Boston. Well, I couldn't because I had to watch my mom. So they flew out here to Chicago and I got somebody to watch my mom for the day so I could film. Great guy that came out to film, nice, and all of that. But yeah, I would love to have done more.
Dude, you should do some more with them.
We'll see. We'll see if they're interested,
They have our number.
Yeah.
We'll talk to Mike Zenga. Ask Mike because catch wrestling's a hot subject right now because there's so many black belts in jiu-jitsu. They're all borrowing from catch wrestling and not giving any homage or hashtags to it.
That irks me, because of the lack of respect. That always bothered me. And even when I did one of my I did the Lost Art of Hooking thing, and I would try to say, okay, I learned this from Lou, or I learned this from Stanley, or I learned this from Doug Bluebot. Yeah, it's all about homage. And you know what? When I say I learned it from Lou, well, that's as far as I can say. Now, Lou would say, oh, I learned it from such and such. There's a lineage. There's a chain.
Yeah, there has to be that.
It's 2,000 years old. You know,
Guys
wrestling.
are stealing it today, though. There a lot of them are just going, "Hey, that's cool. I'm gonna film myself doing that," and that's new jujitsu.
Yeah.
It's new because you're a jujitsu guy and you just added it to your style. That's how that works.
Try pulling it off on somebody who knows how to wrestle like that. You know, that's the other thing.
Yeah.
People don't want to. I have, like you brought up about Brian at your seminar. You learn how to do all those rolls and those sit outs and those hip heists. Yeah. A lot of people don't want to practice that because they want to learn the killing moves. Well, you're never going to pull a kill move if you don't know how to control, how to move, how to wrestle from hold to hold.
That's right.
It's the boring stuff. You know that. You just told us 5 teachers. Huh?
The transitions. It's the transitions, the escapes, the reversals, the stuff that people don't want to work is the most important aspect of the game. And then they all want to learn the submissions. You can see the glum face. Everyone's like ho hum and sad because they have to learn reversals and switches and rides. And then all of a sudden you show one submission and they just light up and their eyes are, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you need the final product. In the old days, they called it a punishment hold. It wasn't even called a submission.
Right.
And it was a punishment hold just to tweak somebody if they were stalling so they could make a move so they could pin them. Most of the matches were won by pins.
Absolutely. And a lot of people don't know that. So they would turn out or whatever just to get pinned to let it go. And then I was taught some moves that were called stretches. I'm going to stretch this guy, which again was a punishment. And then when you add the rips and this and that, all the gouges and which are not allowed anywhere, that changes everything. But what I don't understand, and this really gets me, is because United States of America has such a great history of catch wrestling, all the great champions, Farmer Burns, Frank Gotch, Joe Stecker, on and on, Earl Caddick. And I'm trying to keep it alive, but people are like, oh no, I want to learn, from this country or that country. It's like, it gets frustrating.
Yeah. People need to just take a history lesson. I think there needs to be more historical videos up and books out. You should see, you go on Amazon, there's a lot of catch wrestling books now. I was so surprised. I was taken off. I couldn't believe it. Have you talked to Jeff Curran out of Iowa?
Oh, I thought he was out here somewhere. No.
Not Jeff. I'm sorry, not Jeff Curran. Curran Jacobs.
No, I don't know him.
Curran.
Oh, he's in Michigan, I think, right? Or at least he was.
Oh yeah, Michigan. He's in Michigan, not Iowa.
But yeah, he's won some championships. Yeah, he was kind of I haven't seen stuff on him lately, but yeah, he was for the last 2 years a big name.
He just did a TV or a video, not a documentary called The Love of Catch. And it was kind of historical on the historical aspect. I was surprised he didn't interview you for that, Tony.
No, nobody reaches out to me. I'm like the black. I don't know why. I don't.
Well, maybe they couldn't get in touch with you.
I don't know.
Another interesting thing, though, kind of because you bring up Curran Jacob, is he definitely seems to be what I would consider, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but kind of what I'd call almost a traditionalist or a purist with it. When I've seen him online, like, he wants to do it as the way the sport was done back in the day. And that's cool. I mean, if you want to resurrect that and so basically the pinning, you win by pins.
Yep.
And there's a trade-off when you do that. And there's a big debate, and it's kind of interesting in a way because, that's not what when he was taught by Rod Vaughn, it was to defend himself on the street. And so a lot of the sportive stuff was gone. So there was no pinning per se. You learned the wrestling moves, but it was closer to jiu-jitsu in a sense that you took this guy out. You broke something on him or choked him out. And so, like, I remember reading, and I can't even remember who it was, some catch guys where they actually took jiu-jitsu classes because they said they didn't know finishes from the head and arm position, which shocked me when they said that, because they said, well, when you get head and arm, you're pinning the guy, the match is over, and we don't train anything from there. And I was like, I couldn't believe that, because that's our bread and butter hold down. You fight out of the head and arm. You can submit the guy there. You don't have to go to other styles to learn these things. So it's interesting. So I guess the saying in some ways is Tony's, and one of the things we struggle with is that we're not, in a sense, traditionalists with catch. We're taking the old, we're doing what a catch wrestler would do in a self-defense situation, and so in some ways, like we've clicked with Krav Maga guys because they just want to learn how to defend themselves. They're not going to compete, because when we train with jujitsu guys, quite often it's like, can you please change this hold so or
Is
can
that
I do
legal?
JJ? Yeah, I can't put my foot here. I can't do this.
Is that
And so it's
legal?
like they ask us, and
Legal in
and so
what?
it's a weird niche we're in where we're illegal. There's illegal stuff in jujitsu or MMA. There's stuff that the purists don't want to know, because they want to. A lot of these guys are high level wrestlers and they're looking to compete, and it's like, well, some of these things either A, are too brutal, or like I said, they take the pinning out, which is not comfortable for them, So it is weird. So it's kind of put him in this narrow market and finding people who, like, because I was not a wrestler to begin with. I wanted to learn how to defend myself, and what he was saying was clicking with me a lot more than some other styles that I'd come. I mean, everybody needs grappling for their self-defense, but it's like, oh, this is how I make it horrible. Like this is how I really, this is when you start to see this is how bad it can get. Because when you're grappling, your body's very vulnerable, and you give up a slight bit of advantage, the hands can get to parts of the body that are, and that's what he was taught. And so it's so I guess to answer to your question, we fall between the cracks a lot. It was like, who is the market for? If it doesn't work in IBJJ, it doesn't work in traditional catch, and so that's some of the things that we're swimming up against the current on, no pun intended.
Well, one of the guys I've trained for a long time, Javier Palomo, he's won several world championships in jiu-jitsu and submission grappling events. So he's made the crossover. He's not a striker or anything, but in order for him to be popular with the crowd, the clique, it's jiu-jitsu guys. So that's fine. There's nothing we're going to do, not that I can do about it. I mean, I've been thumping at it on the internet since the 90s. It's never going to change.
That's
But
right.
I could tell you, I respect people like yourself, Josh Barnett and stuff. You're, to me, and I've said this before on these podcasts, you guys are the real deal. When people ask me to not recommend, what's the word, Joe, endorse or who? Yeah, I'm a hard sell, man. I'm like a guy that says most guys aren't very good or they lack this or that. There's a few guys that I think are excellent at what they do, and you're at the top of the list. I mean, you're phenomenal from what I've seen. I hope I get to meet you in person one of these days. And
We need to meet sometime.
yeah, but we're not going for ramen. We're gonna, if you're in Chicago, we're going for pizza. We can have pizza and beer, not ramen.
Yeah. Well, I was just having ramen because we were in Japan.
I know it. But yeah, I love.
It's an Italian restaurant. What's the one with the meat sandwiches? It's real famous. Right there.
We're talking Italian beefs, like Portillo's is the chain.
Yes.
Everybody loves Portillo's. Yeah.
Jellos. Oh man.
Yeah.
Ooh.
That's,
Well, I just love, you had a different take on it because you were really exposed, I guess, and interested in movie arts and martial arts. And I never really was, because the negative about one of the things was always being beat down, not physically, but verbally, about you're not a martial artist, you're a boxer, you're a wrestler, you're not a martial artist, you're not a martial artist, you're not a martial artist. So no, I'm like, okay, well, all right, I'm not a martial artist.
Well,
So
boxing and wrestling are America's oldest martial arts.
I know that, right? You know it. They just didn't want to hear it, even though while I'm beating them up, they couldn't understand this. So so I never really got that desire to move to California. I just, to me, California seemed like on the other side of the world, really.
Yeah.
And I kind of regret it now because
You
I
could
had
have
a lot
been
of
in movies.
huh?
Could have been in a lot of movies.
Yeah, oh, no, yeah, no, not movies. I don't, but I would love to have been around it with you guys and exchanging ideas and learning different things, and that would have been so great. But because California was a big influence growing up, because most of the television shows we'd watch were like filmed in California, and you kind of get a sense of it. And I was in the inner city ghetto of Cleveland. I couldn't grasp the Brady Bunch. I had no connection to that. All right. So I'm like, oh my goodness. But I've been to California several times to do seminars. None recently, but the last few that I did were in LA. At a pro wrestling, one of my students at the time owned a pro wrestling gym, but he wanted me to teach his guys, how to really hook and defend themselves against, because they were doing this like an extreme form of wrestling where literally the fans would attack you for real. So they wanted, they wanted his guys to be tough guys.
Wow.
And then, but then things happen, life gets in the way, and then the pandemic hit, and then, the prices exploded. My student lived in San Diego. He now lives in, over the border in Mexico, where it's much cheaper, and he doesn't have the gym. So, things just seem to happen, but I have fond memories of LA, even Northern California. I remember many years ago, I did a seminar in Beverly Hills, and I trained Daryl Goller, who was in one of the UFCs.
I know Daryl.
Oh man, well, how's he doing?
That was Greg Nelson's coach. So I worked with Daryl on the TV show. What was it called?
Not American thing?
It wasn't. It was Battle Dome. It's called Battle Dome.
Oh.
And he was a wrestler, and I had to tell him to take it easy. I go, please don't hurt any of the contestants. Wrestle. But he was Greg Nelson's Greco coach in Minnesota. And then Daryl Golar went over to Brazil and was training the Brazilian top team. Mario Sperry, Bustamante, Vitor Belfort, and all those guys. That's what he was doing. I don't know if he's still over there or not, but I know he was loving the lifestyle there for a while.
Is Yuri Nakamura still coaching?
He's back in Japan. He went home, and he almost died.
Ooh.
He had a heart issue. There was like something, I don't know what it was. He wasn't eating any carbs, and something happened and it affected his heart. He had open heart surgery.
Oh no.
And they just said, hey, you can't get back on an airplane, come back across, because the air pressure would be too hard on your heart. So he hasn't been back since. They cut him open and down to his navel, and then sealed him up. And the next day he was walking around. They were just like, hey, you're not even supposed to be out of bed, let alone awake. How are you walking around? And he's like, I feel fine.
Knowledge to share, man. I hope he lives a long life. He's another guy with a lot of knowledge. I never got to meet any of you guys, Not a wrestler, but did you ever meet Fumio Demura?
Yes, I did. He was working on a couple movies down here. He was with Kerry Ogawa and James Liu. And James Liu is working on a movie down. They're shooting down at the beach, and I went down on the set. I wasn't hustling. I was just down to see, because he said that there were some good fight scenes, and Kerry Ogawa had to fight Fumio Demura, and it was pretty amazing just to watch these guys moving around like that on the movie set. It's kind of cool.
See, I've never even been on a movie set, man. I mean, I've talked to actors and I've bodyguarded some people, but I've missed out on that,
you're not missing that. There's a lot of sitting around and waiting.
Oh yeah.
But there's definitely most of the time you're talking to your friends, and then you get called and they go, okay, but you got to do a lot of rehearsal, because when you're doing fight scenes, you gotta rehearse it so many times, and these guys are all in shape, so they're required to train, 5 days a week, just like a fighter. Because when they go on set, they go, all right, here's what you got to do. And these guys are working all the time, so they've got to be able to flip and trick and drive and burn and fall, And then when you're older, you want to start coordinating. So suddenly you're the stunt choreographer, or stunt coordinator, And then eventually you want to be like Chad. Chad's now and Dave Leach and Damon. Those are my three friends that I grew up with training. They're all directors. They're doing second unit, first unit. And the movie John Wick, that's Chad Stahelski. That was my training partner. Chad and I fought in shootout together. And now him and Dave Leach are the directors for John Wick. Now they're on John Wick 4.
Well, what
Those
about,
movies are awesome.
how long were you with Gene LaBelle?
So I was able to see Gene. He used to be at all my fights, and he kept saying, "You owe me 3 hours," because I fought Paul Jones and I got a crossface on him, and he said, I can't believe you didn't rip his face off. He goes, "I need to get with you for 3 hours and show you how to correctly rip someone's face off." And it's funny because, Gene just passed away.
No.
Yeah, Gene just passed away right before Antonio Inoki. So Gene passed away a month ago, and Antonio Inoki passed away.
Holy shit. I did not know this. Oh, no. You're sure of this? I mean, I can't believe this.
Yeah, I went to his wake.
Oh my God.
To honor him. And it was weird because Antonio Inoki died not so much after him.
I didn't know Inoki died.
Yeah. So that's why it's important that you continue to, hey, it's left into our hands to continue the legacy. If you don't teach it and pass it on to others and make it public, then it's going to die out.
Well,
and it was passed on to you for a reason, to pass it on to others and keep it alive. And you find the Malenko brothers that they learn from Carl Gotch, but I don't think they're out teaching seminars. They're pro wrestlers, and I think that it needs to stay out there, and the only way it's going to stay alive is the people that were taught by them, the ones that have passed, paying homage to all these guys that have passed.
Well, I'm just in a state. My mind's. I'm shot now when you're telling me about Gene LaBelle.
That you didn't know.
He invited me to come up to. I guess he had some cabin in the woods or something like that, where all the guys would get together and work out.
Up in Big Bear.
Yeah. He said, "Come on out. We'll all go up there. We work out all day long." Da 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 da. I just never was able to get out there.
Yeah.
I mean,
Life
I just
goes
don't know what to
fast.
say.
Life is short and it goes fast. So when you get an opportunity, but here's the thing, it's a big deal that you had to look after your mother. That's extremely important. And it's honorable that you did that you didn't, a lot of people easily would have, oh, this is too hard. I've got to put my mom in a nursing home, instead of, stepping up to the plate and taking care of her. That's extremely important, and that's honorable. And that's a big deal. That's a big deal. And the fact that you missed out on some stuff, that's okay, because there's still time for you to do a lot of stuff, and you should continue with BJJ Fanatics. I'll hit Mike up and tell him that that he should have you do some more catch wrestling stuff. Definitely.
Well, that's awful nice of you. Thank you. Yeah, sure. I appreciate it. Well, the mom thing was like 10 years of it, and it finally got to just too dangerous for both of us, because she would have the gas oven, the burners, and walking around. She freaked. Dementia and Alzheimer's. She doesn't know idea who I am.
Wow,
she doesn't.
That's tough.
She still thinks her parents are alive. But no, this thing about Gene. I've seen his books. He used to send me. Matter of fact. I used to be on his Christmas card thing before I moved, and he used to send me patches. Yeah, right. I showed Joe some of those patches.
Yeah.
And his book, his grappling book, big thick thing, and I just always wish I could have. He was another one of the guys I wish I could have met. I'm lucky I met Larry. I'll never probably get a chance to meet Yuri, because I won't be going over to Japan, but I would love to meet you and Josh in person. I start. Go ahead.
Hold on. I was going to say something. I forget. I'm sorry.
Well, it's
forgot.
all right with me. I just hate starting to name names and then I forget somebody, and then they're like, "Well, what about me?" You know, I'm very forgetful, but all you guys have been very proactive with not just catch in general, but you guys have been gentlemen and ambassadors to the sport of MM mixed martial arts or and everything else. And I know that Marcus Charles, who I have not talked to or seen in 10 years or more, he thinks you walk on water, you know, you're just a great guy. No, he does. And he thinks you're just a great guy.
Oh.
And that speaks volumes, man. These
He was
people don't.
he was under Larry, and I promised Larry I'd look after him when Larry passed.
Well, I'm glad you did.
Yeah. But Gene LaBelle, I called him because Bobby Bass, the jiu-jitsu guy, he was a wrestler also. Bobby Bass was the first black belt of the Machados, and Bobby's a friend of mine, and we were talking because Gene, they owned a cabin next to each other, and he goes, "I heard Gene died," and he said that 6 months ago. So I called up Gene, and I said, "Hey," he goes, "I'm still alive, Eric. I just haven't left my house for 3 years."
Oh boy.
And I said, he goes, "You know, I've got all these ranks. I got all these belts and all these ranks from all these people." And he said, "The most important thing that I have on my wall is the sadistic bastard certificate I got from Carl Gotch." And he goes, "Carl Gotch came and watched me in a few of my matches, and he shook his head and he said, 'You're too nice.' He said, you need to be ripping people's faces off." He said, if someone pulls guard on you, you need to break their ankles. And if you don't, you need to burn your shoes."
Yeah, that sounds like my coach.
So it was funny, but for Gene to say that, because he just started reminiscing and talking about Carl Gotch. And because when I trained with him, he would say, "Do you know this? Do you know the short arm scissors? Do you know this? Do you know the clockhead scissors? Do you know the neck screw? Do you know?" And I go, "Yes." And he goes, "Where did you learn that?" And I go, I learned it from Sensei Yuri Nakamura, but he was trained by Satoru Sayama, but he was also trained by Carl Gotch. So we're of Gotch lineage." And he goes, "Well, no wonder it looks the same."
There you go.
He was under Carl Gotch. That was why. Interesting.
One of the thing that sticks out with me with Gene, he told me once on the phone, he's like, he goes, "My martial arts, I've got this X amount of black belts. I got all these trophies." He says, "But the house that I live in, the motorcycles that I have, all this other shit, that's because of the movies." You know, he was
right.
like, that's where he made his money. He made nothing. He said, in essence, what he was saying is he made nothing in the martial arts. It was all the movies that gave him his, you know, his money.
He told me, "There's no residual checks in fighting, Eric."
There you go.
He goes, "You want to think about movies, you gotta get that residual check." Because that
Are
was
you still acting?
I just did a movie called The Trainer, and the guy that hired me, he did American History X with Norton, when Norton did that curb stomp scene with that guy.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's the same director, and he goes, "I want brutal and nasty fighting. The small guy's got to fight this big guy. I just want brutal, nasty crap. And the big guy's going to beat the little guy up, and he's going to give him 50 blows. And then the little guy, as he's getting knocked out, is going to come back, and he's going to just annihilate him." So there's a kick, catch, takedown, toenail rip. We ripped the toenail off the guy, hit a single leg, ankle pick, hip push, ankle pick, turnover to a STF. He hit a STF, step over toe hold face lock, and cross faced the guy so hard and ripped all his teeth out. The guy spit out all his teeth. And it was funny because he wanted that brutality, and all the stunt guys are looking at me going, "Your fight scene's crazy as shit." And I go, "That's what he asked for." He said, "I want funny, but I want brutal." And I go, "Well, you came to the right guy, because I can make anything funny." And he goes, yeah, but we want brutal. We want brutal. And I go, yeah, but it's got to be funny too. So it's coming out pretty soon. It's called The Trainer.
I got to see it, man.
Yeah,
Did you have?
it's
Were you
funny.
involved with the gangs of New York?
No, that was John Peretti.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, John Peretti did that. You mean with Daniel Day-Lewis?
No, who was? This is like an old movie now, but what was that guy that did? I thought the guy that did Titanic was in it.
Yeah, that was
Leonardo
Gangs of New York.
DiCaprio?
Yeah. Mhm.
Well,
Joe, what?
in the Gangs of New York, I think it was Daniel Day-Lewis, right?
Oh, I don't
I think
remember. Who was it, Joe?
Well, you're both right. So Leonardo DiCaprio, who was in Titanic, was in Gangs of New York, and so was
Okay.
Daniel Day-Lewis.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I don't remember the movie now. It's been too
Yeah,
long.
John
but-
Peretti was a Jean LaBelle black belt. John Peretti was a matchmaker. He was a matchmaker for Extreme Fighting when I fought on Extreme Fighting 3 and 4, and then he became the matchmaker for a thing called or for the UFC, and then I think he was at one called Battlecade. But John Peretti was he was in the movie, but yeah, I didn't work on that, but that looked like a fun movie to work on.
Yeah, I guess I don't remember it now too much, but I used to get a couple emails. People were like, it looks like they're doing some of your moves. Did you choreograph the movie? I'm like, man, I've never been at a movie set in my life.
John Peretti.
All right.
John Peretti was a catch wrestler under Jean LaBelle. Catch style, judo catch. Another person you should probably meet and train with is Gokor. Now, Gokor was Jean LaBelle's right-hand man, so he got a lot of the submissions stuff from Jean, and he was a good sambist and judoka.
Oh, I've heard of him. You bet.
Gokor's your age. He's your
Cool.
age, and he's Armenian. So he had Carl Parisian, Manny Gamburian, Ronda Rousey. They all trained with Jean and with Gokor.
Yeah, I know that Carol was a very good fighter from what what I saw of him. Very interesting to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're lucky in a way that you're out there. For me, it was kind of a different world, and yeah, I guess now that I'm getting older, I'm getting like Gene. You're reminiscing. I wish I could have done this, or
But there's still time for you to do stuff.
yeah, I'll get it together, man. I just got to get, life sometimes has to, gets in the way, and I'm still dealing with the nursing home stuff now, so
Yeah.
the smoke will clear. But I kind of tried to do I loved music too. I was a jazz guy, so I wanted to go in that direction and this and that. Nothing really ever made it the way I thought it would, but
What did you play? Were you a guitarist or?
no, I was a drummer. I started off as a drummer. And then, believe it or not, I played jazz accordion. Nobody plays jazz
Oh,
accordion.
wow.
Yeah, right.
Wow.
So yeah,
That's
right.
cool.
But yeah, I was a drummer, and I used to love to play all the kind of music, and you end up having to play gigs that you don't want to play because you got to make some kind of money.
Yeah, you got to make money.
You got to make money. You know what it's like. So,
That's right.
but I just wish that we would have met. Well, we still have plenty of time to do that. You're right.
Still
We got
time, yeah.
a lot of time, and maybe in the spring or summer I'll head out west, but now I'm not real good with the geography. Before we logged on, you said you were in Orange County. It's not LA. Like how far from LA are you?
45 minutes. I'm outside. Yeah, LA to me got a little bit sad because it reminded me too much of hustling and all my friends working in Hollywood, and everyone was like, hey, where's so-and-so? Oh, he's working on a movie. And so your friends are never around. So you try to hustle and get on the same movies as they, and then it gets to the point where sometimes you're competing with them. And it became kind of a lonely place to live, with so many people there. It just was kind of lonely. And Orange County for me saved me from moving out of California, because Orange County is so different than LA. It's so different. The energy here, every house I lived in LA, every apartment I lived in LA was haunted. Every single one of them. I moved out here. I got a house. My house isn't haunted. I'm happy. Nothing like living in a haunted apartment.
You're
Yeah.
cracking me up, man.
Oh, I know. Yeah, and I didn't believe that stuff. I had tons of stuff. I mean, my dog was always scared. Uh, I could go on, but anyways, yeah, Orange County's clear. So, hey, Halloween's here. Bring it on. I don't care. I don't care about that. Before it was Halloween in LA, I get scared because I knew all the shit was going to come start stirring up.
Well, you're not planning on leaving then, right? You're going to stay there for a while.
Well, yeah, right now. I mean, this coming up year is supposed to be a weird year because of the possible food shortage. I know the inflation is big, but when I was in Italy this summer on CNN, they were saying that prepare for the food shortages that are coming in November, starting worldwide in November. And they said that on Italian CNN. And I know believe nothing that you hear, half of what you see, and then everything that you feel. But I'm just wondering what's going to happen. Are things going to get pretty bad here, or are things going to be okay?
Well, I didn't. Time.
I'm an
will tell, right?
optimist. I'm an optimist. All I could say is stock up on some food just in case.
Yeah.
Stock up on some.
That's good advice in general, honestly. I mean, you never know. Even, I was thinking about, was Texas a couple winters ago where they got their power wiped out?
That's
I
right.
mean, that wasn't even world events. I mean, right now, world events are very scary, right? We've got war in Europe, all kinds of supply chain things. I mean,
Well, a lot of people think about the nuclear. I think it's all a movie. I think it's a show. I don't think it's really going to be. I don't think that's going to happen.
No, even if they don't go nuclear, I mean, they talk about Ukraine being the breadbasket to so many, so much of the rest of the world, and they're cut down. So, I mean, at a minimum, things are teetering. But I guess my point being is even if things weren't as precarious as they are right now in world events, I mean, because we often talk about like self-defense beyond that on this podcast. Like we have people from the tracker school who are survivalists.
Yeah, I train a guy that does that.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, part of the ethic is like, honestly, be prepared. It's more than just hand-to-hand fighting, to be safe.
Yeah. Well, he went to New Jersey, and part of their scenarios were they had to prepare each other. They said, okay, let's say so-and-so dies. Now there's no food. We're going to have to eat him. So they had to prepare themselves mentally to eat this guy and how they'd prepare him. And then they're talking about a situation where they're coming across, and here's a guy on the side of the road and he's raping a woman. Do you stop to help that woman, or do you continue to keep going so you stay safe? And these are all different scenarios that they were talking about. It was weird. I woke up this morning thinking about, they were talking about eating each other. And I
was this training he did just recently, by the way?
Yes, 2 weeks.
Oh, because there was something called the escape class. So
I think that was it.
Yeah, I totally made a pass on that when I read the description. I was like, I'm not ready for that because they have, I don't want to digress too much while we have you, but they have the scout level classes. So once you get to the scout level at Tom Brown, you start to get these classes open to you. And so I got the invite and I read the description. It's like, this is going to be run like society is broken down, and you're going to be on the run for a week.
You're right.
Sleeping in the cold.
Yes.
And it's just getting a little feedback. It's like, oh, it's even worse than that they described. So yeah, but that's cool that he went, because that was only, I think it was like open to only 30 people, the first 30 people that were in, and it was going to be run, it was, someday maybe I'll be back for that, because they don't run it every year. That's kind of like a special thing.
Yeah, he's a tracker, but so yesterday we filmed some stuff for YouTube. We just did some, believe it or not, JKD and I had a dream. I woke up. They go, "What do you want to do?" It's huge right now in self-defense and catch wrestling. I go, "Yeah, but I had a dream that we need to do Kali and JKD and some striking." And the guy's like, well, that's not what we talked about. And I said, but that's what we're going to do. And then right then my friend shows up and he goes, yeah, I went to the escape. What was it called? The escape class?
Yeah, it was just the escape scout class. Yeah.
Oh yeah. But he was a scout. So he was one of the coaches.
Oh, wow. Okay.
He showed me a picture. they lit up the woods and it was all smoky and the woods were all lit up and it looked scary.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're not supposed to talk too much about the scout classes, but when they do it, it's cinematic. Like it's sometimes they turn the woods into kind of like a fun house, like a horror house.
Yeah.
Some of the events you do. Yeah, like I said, I've only gone through stage one of that. I survived that somehow. But then, yeah, I read the description for that, and I was like, yeah, maybe in a couple of years, I still got some skills I need to work on. But it's cool that it sounds amazing.
I hope nothing gets to that point, but maybe in our lifetimes it may get to that point, because they said that we've all chose this time of life because of the outstanding things that are coming our way, to be a witness to this time that we all chose to be here at this time for these events.
And I mean, it's always, hope for the best and work for the best, but you've got to be prepared for that worst case scenario. And it's not fun to think about.
The bug out bag, they're saying it's cool to have a bug out bag, but what if you don't have where are you going to bug out to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a big one.
I'm not an expert on this like you guys, but I do know that during the pandemic, I've known guys that were, one of these survivalist types. They were freaking out over the pandemic. I'm like, dude, that was nothing. Okay, if you can't handle the pandemic, you're not going to be able to handle the real thing. So,
well,
I think that
problem is going to happen when the food trucks stop delivering food to the stores. That's when the Civil War is going to start breaking out. That's when people are going to be trying to break through your window and break your door down and take whatever you have. So if you don't have a sustainable house, people could come through our windows easily. And that would be no big deal. You'd have to have a barricade outside, people watching all the time. You'd have to have, a good arsenal of bullets just to defend. You get 3 guys that have gone through these scout classes or these classes like this. They're going to come guns ablazing. They're going to kick your door down and they're going to take every ounce of food that you have. And if you don't have a sustainable place to live, you're going to become subservient to that. Or who knows if they're going to, if people don't have food, are they going to start opening the FEMA buildings and feeding the people that don't have, and that's getting people in FEMA camps? Is that going to happen? That's another one. Like, wow. Hopefully
this podcast is getting heavy.
Yeah. Well, I'm saying what's going to happen. My question is, what's going to happen in the beginning of the year when they're talking about possible food shortages? Is it for inflation only, so they can up the prices, or is it actually going to be, lack of food?
Real. What's funny, I think there's real strains on the system, clearly. Like, I just saw a thing on the PBS NewsHour where the Mississippi is at record low levels water-wise, and it's stopping the ships up. So, like, that's just one piece of the puzzle, right? Like, all these supplies going down the Mississippi are being gummed up, and that adds to the problem. And so I don't know if it's just one. There's going to be, unfortunately, it seems like several bad things are happening, and when do we reach that tipping point? When these things all add up. And I think, just like, honestly, I mean, yeah, obviously, if you can be prepared to be sustainable on your own, that's ideal. But even in the short term, just like what I do kind of is I slowly just get a few extra things. I'm not hoarding. When I go grocery shopping, I make sure I have a few extra cans of tuna or a couple extra boxes of pasta, because
beans, canned green beans, or even rice and beans. The problem, if you hold rice for a long time, like a year, and you're storing it, there's eggs in your rice and they hatch.
Oh yeah, I've heard about that. Yeah, the
moths and stuff like that. So what do? Do you just eat them?
Depends how bad it is, I guess. Yeah. But I even just having to me, like the Texas scenario again, when their electrical system, just have a few week buffer. Maybe, I mean, there's like, if the total collapse, that's a whole other scenario to be ready for. But it's just like, hey, what if you're snowed in for a few days? It doesn't even have to be the end of civilization necessarily. I mean, Tony, where you're at, if they dump 20 feet, 20 inches of snow or whatever, that could shut you guys down for, couldn't get to the store. So always having a little bit of that buffer is something to, as far as like self-defense people, that should be another aspect that people are thinking of. How do I, have my necessities? Do I have a couple of gallons of extra just drinking water, stashed away somewhere? Just start small and build up. Obviously, yeah, the better you can be, the better, but just anything is better than nothing, I guess.
Right. Well, we went the opposite direction.
Yeah,
But that's okay.
well,
Hey, that's reality. Reality-based self-defense isn't just defending yourself in the street, but
nope.
being prepared against, multiple attackers. Do you have knives placed around your house or your apartment? Do you have, strategically placed weapons, where they're at, where you could get to? Do you have a weapon in your bathroom if you're in the bathtub?
Yeah.
Like a karambit or a gun or a sword.
And learning how to improvise weapons. If you're in a strange location, find something that you can use as a weapon, learn to assess that quickly. Yeah, this is all my kind of shit. This is the stuff I like to do, the reality based of it. Well, I didn't know any better.
Yeah. Another thing that I think I would tell people to do is get a Ziploc bag and put a little bit, fill it half full of sand, and then put black pepper and red pepper in it and shake it up. Keep in your pocket. Yeah, in case you have to projectile a handful of sand, and that's so cheap too. That's a good one to get you to get away from people or masses. You throw sand in their eyes.
I had a buddy that always wore baseball caps. I don't, but he always did, and he had 2 fishing sinkers in the back of that hat, and he would, and he got good with that. I seen what he did to pieces of wood. You wouldn't want to get hit in the head with that hat of his,
They have a hat out they sell, and it's called a snap hat or something like that. And it's
really?
Yeah, and it's got lead in it. And
there you go.
It's like a flapjack.
Nice.
Flapjacks. I forget what it's called, but they just grab the visor and they twap you with it.
Yeah.
It's got lead or something in it. That's interesting.
Yeah, but
I do
this. Well, I know it's getting late. You're probably in a hurry, but I got to tell you something. This has been the #1 podcast. You're such an interesting dude. No, you're an interesting fellow, man. Not only are you talented, you're articulate. Joe, though, this modeling thing, Joe still thinks he's the best looking guy that ever lived. So you guys can hash that out amongst yourselves.
I only did it because I wanted to get into the acting aspect. And then my acting, I figured all my lines and monologues that I did were all comedy. So I was like, hey, I think I want to go into comedy. Because even though I didn't try to be funny, everything I did became funny. So I'm like, I think I'm just going to tell jokes all the time. And so now if I'm out in the street, like in a dangerous area, I'm always chewing on napkins or paper. And I always carry a straw, like I'm chewing on a straw. And if someone comes running up to me, I try to spitball them, and I'm pretty good. I can hit them right in the eyes. But you got to have paper wet in your mouth the whole time. So
You're
that's
nuts, man.
You got to chew on it. This piece of paper.
Well, I highly recommend everybody seek out Erik for training, even if you don't live in a California region. I'm sure he can set something up with you. Joe will put all your contact information, Erik, on the YouTube channel, so people can reach out to you. But man, you've been great.
Thank you,
Joe. Oh man, no, this is more than I ever expected. You're just cool. You're just a cool guy to hang out with and talk.
Hey, we're the same age almost.
Yeah. I mean, I'm still.
Young.
Yeah, we are pretty much.
Right.
And so we got a lot of life experiences.
I'll talk to Mike Zenga and ask him if he could do another catch wrestling series with you.
Yeah, sure, that'd be great. Sometime next year it'd be awesome. And Joe, what do you have to say about all this?
Well, I'm just happy to be the fly on the wall here. I'm glad to get you two guys together and just listen. And I'm happy for our listeners. But it's like, Yeah, I'm glad. I mean, this was like I couldn't have asked for a better 100th episode. This was just awesome.
Yeah.
Honestly, what a great way to seal this in this kind of era of the podcast and start something new up. Like I said, I've got a million other questions for you, Erik. So maybe for hopefully we won't wait another 100 episodes to have you back. Yeah, and maybe Tony and I can head out to your place sometime, and that would be great.
Great. You guys are welcome anytime.
Thank you
Same
so
here.
much. And
Anytime you're in Chicago, look me up, look him up, and we'll be glad to do anything we can. Pick you up at the airport. You can crash here.
You guys live by each other?
No, fortunately,
No, we're about an hour apart, but it don't matter. We can triangulate. Joe's good at that. But anyway, everybody, I want to again, everybody say thanks for Erik to be out here on the show. And
Thank you,
Erik,
guys.
I hope to hear from you and see you soon.
That's right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
God bless you
You're
guys.
welcome.
Stay safe and healthy.
You
You
too.
too.
See you
Bye-bye,
guys.
buddy.
Thank
You
you.
bet.